I welcome you to rainy Arizona today. I love you very much. I'm so glad you could come. You know, when I was in college, I started out as a physics major, changed to economics, and because of one economics professor, I changed into philosophy. There's a huge difference between philosophy and true spirituality. I studied all kinds of things in philosophy, like what exists, what is real, what is knowledge, what is self. And I felt they never really touched on it, that the Easterners went into it deeper, like Ramana, who says you have to plunge into yourself deeper and deeper to find the self. But most of what passes as spirituality, especially what you see on Facebook, is really philosophy. They tell you without proof the way the world is. Robert Wood begins Satsang by saying, "You do not exist. You are not real. The world is the lowest hell. The world is but a mirage, an optical mirage," he'd say, an illusion. Wake up from the illusion. Wake up to yourself as consciousness, as Parabrahman. I didn't have the slightest fucking idea what he was talking about. To talk in such abstractions, while at the same time trying to live in the body, working to pay rent, going to the store, getting things to eat, then cooking, arguing with whoever you're living with. Those ideas that Robert gave us, you do not exist, you have no free will. The world is a dream. Wake up from that dream. You are Parabrahman. All of this meant bullshit to me. And I got the same thing in Buddhism. Same sort of ideas in Buddhism. That life is suffering, that there is an end to suffering, and that's by following the Eightfold Noble Path, right living, right thinking, following the Noble Eightfold Path. And then practicing meditation or working on a koan. But if you follow Buddhism, if you follow Ramana, if you follow Robert, nowhere do they deal with how to work with emotions. They're absent. Sasaki Roshi in 1975 or 76, when I went back to visit him, I said, I look back upon our time together with great love. And he immediately turned a cherry red and was absolutely silent for 30, 40 seconds. And then he barked out something in Japanese. He spoke English, but he spoke in Japanese, so his monk could interpret. And the monk said, Roshi said, You must never speak like this. There's no love in Zen. There's no love in Zen. If you feel this, joke about it. Make a joke, but don't say you look at the time together with great love. He was entirely embarrassed by speaking of love for him. And such is even more the case with the neo-Advaitins now that say there's no separate self, whatever that means. Everything is non-dual, one. The existence of an ego or any separation is only apparent. And it goes on and on and on. They're all talking about truths. What's true about ourselves, about the world, about our perceptions, about our life. They're not true. They're brainwashing. You know what happens if you believe the phrase, there's no free will? You relax. Say, what can I do? There's no free will. I can't make any choices. So what you do is you relax. And you do more or less what you want or driven to do. Or what everyday life makes you do. To live in consistency with society, your landlords, the gas company, the water company, etc. It's a lie that frees you from the nasty thinking process of how to decide what to do in life. It's a statement designed to give you peace of mind, in a sense. So's the thing about you do not exist. Your problems are not important. They're only temporary, a flash in time. Instead, look to the unchanging self. Well, I looked to the unchanging self and I found nothing but change. Consciousness came and went. Waking consciousness came, waking consciousness went. Sleep awareness came, awareness of sleep left. Awareness of awareness was there, and then it was gone again in sleep. Sure, there are ways that you can say that you were conscious during sleep because you remember having been asleep. But you weren't aware that you were aware when you were asleep. Only afterwards do you remember that you slept, and you can even remember something about the state of sleeping. But you don't do that when it's happening. So any generalization that after death we'll be able to remember death too and awaken to a new life, it's totally speculation. But Robert was there for people who were suffering, to try to take you out of suffering into happiness. The happiness of peacefulness, of peaceful acceptance of everything that happened in the world because you can't do anything about it. And in that peacefulness to find the happiness. But it was a rescue philosophy, really. It was for rescuing people from suffering. But if you weren't suffering, you really couldn't see the point of the practice. Now, take the energy people, the tantric people. They're high on life. They use sex and other kinds of drives in us and transmute it into God realization. The desire for sex, the desire for love from another, the desire for a cookie or a good meal or a pleasurable place to stay, the desire for a warm bath on a cold night. All these desires we have so close to us and we feel almost are us. So if we focus on the body, focus on our inner feelings, our heart beating, grief, depression, anxiety, love, jealousy, anger, fear. Wow, what a trip in comparison to Buddhism, where everything doesn't exist. There's only nothingness or emptiness. And forms come out of that emptiness and disappear back into emptiness. And the forms aren't really that important because they're temporary. What is important is the emptiness, because that's static, that stays. But even that's not true, because when you go to sleep at night, the void disappears and there's nothingness. Only nothingness is absolute, because the nothingness has a relative constancy, but even that is not true. But say it is true, that Buddhism is true, that Advaita is true. But Advaita only offers you escape from suffering. It gives you peace from the problems you have in the world. But what if instead you could find such joy as to be unimaginable? Realize that life was temporary, you're going to die, but even death may be a wonderful experience of giving yourself away, of surrender. What if each moment, instead of thinking about paying rent the next day, getting a second job, or how are you going to pay for food, or the cat needs to go to a vet, and these kind of mundane problems, if instead you can constantly feel bliss inside, the awakening of Kundalini, the awakening of Shakti within you, the awakening of healing energies within you, feeling of bliss. People talk about this as escaping the mundane world altogether, because now, in a way, you're in constant dialogue with God at a level entirely absent in the mundane world, which is a very practical world of transactions. Giving money for this, giving money for that, making money, earning money, using money, going to a bank, going to a restaurant, getting gifts, etc. It's all transaction, and it goes on, and it takes up all of your time. What if instead you had a lover that occupied all of your time? A lover who you thought of all the time. A lover who, when you talked to her or him, you felt your whole body come alive. Your sexuality comes alive. The energy in your gut comes alive, because that's the power center of the body. You feel very powerful. And then you have energies moving through your body, like slow-moving electric currents, but they don't feel like electricity. They feel like joy. They feel like love. They feel powerful. They move through your heart and up into your brain and explode in your brain in all kinds of bliss and light. They move down your arms into your hands and outward into the world, and you can use that energy for healing. What if instead of being in a cave of silence that Robert talks about, you were in a universe of light and energy, and you played with the light and energy, and you created things with the light and energy, and you exalted in your own existence, because you recognize that within you lies God, and within you also is a little God, which is you. consisting or comprised of that same energy as the great God is, the big God. And then one day, loving another so much that you drop to your knees and then to the ground and just hold her feet or his feet in complete surrender, complete love and devotion, thinking not 1 inch of oneself except to be of service to that person. And then you get a vision of God, both you and her, you and him, together lie at God's feet, feeling the total grace that only God can give you, free of all sins, free of all guilt, free of all regret, totally happy, blissfully happy in that silence of total forgiveness and emptiness. And in that state, you see God. You feel God's presence. You feel your lover's presence also. You and she or he are on the same level, under God's foot, giving him support, loving to bear his weight on your body. Even if it crushes you, you will be happy to die for your God. That's how it feels. Then sometimes people, when they first feel the energies feel so strong. They believe it's something other than themselves, some alien thing, an entity, something from the unconscious. Or in my case, I thought of it as God, because the energies were so powerful, and filled with blinding light and ecstatic energies. And they rose inside of me and passed above me and radiated around the universe. And this was my constant companion, this God, the divine. And continuing to look inside of me, I found out I was the same energies, but slightly separated from God. Like he was my big brother, my master. And I got to him through loving my beloved human female partner. So human relationship done very deeply, very intuitively, complete surrender led me to God and surrender to God. And when I surrendered to God, God revealed himself to me in all of his glory. And since that time, I've known that I am God and living with God. The divine lives within me as me. Not that we're one, but we're two. We're comprised of the same energies, the life force. And God is the generalization of the life force in all of us, in all life forms, from humans to mammals to snails, worms, insects. They all have the same life force in them, and we feel that identity with all of life forms. And we don't want to kill them or harm them. We wish them happiness because they are us. And we wish ourselves happiness. And when we see something killed, we hate it. It takes something away from us. We become gentler and gentler. Maybe for time. This is the life of energies. This is the life of the Shakti path, whether it's a Kundalini path, or the way I teach it, or the way Chaitanananda teaches it, or Shankananda teaches it. Kashmir Shaivism. It's a way, instead of thinking, trying to understand what Krishnamurti said and meant, what Osho said and meant, but especially Nisargadatta, Ramana, and Robert Adams, and that particular branch of Advaita, what they mean by the particular words, what the experience is, what is the states that they're experiencing, and what conclusion do they come from after experiencing those states. And once again, you realize their words are not truth. Their words are said to you to evoke a certain kind of state in you, of peace or joy or energetic interactions and orgasms, depending on who the teacher is and what path they're taking you on. Is it a path of emptiness and nothingness, like Robert takes us on, to utter peace? And Ramana, the same. And Nisargadatta, the same, but in a slightly different way, more intellectual way. Of denying the personhood of things, of the relevance of any experience to you, whoever you are, because who you are is beyond experience, beyond the world, beyond anything in consciousness. That you have to picture. He's very, how would you call it, consistent in his expression of it, Nisargadatta. He says you have to believe this, that you're not the body. You're not your mind. And by endless repetition, by reading Nisargadatta, his talks, listening to Nisargadatta-like teachers, this belief becomes your reality. And you live in that belief reality, where the world is an illusion, a dream to be woken up from. And you have experiences consistent with that worldview, just like I did with Robert. Seeing myself as separate from consciousness, and that consciousness came and went like any other phenomena, to me, in emptiness. And Robert recognized that as enlightenment in me. And for 15 years, I sat in emptiness, watching consciousness, waiting for some final explosion. But when it came, it wasn't an explosion out of emptiness. It was ecstatic love for a woman who came to me and surrendered to me, who loved me, who told me of Rumi and how much Rumi gave her feelings about me. I was totally loved by her, and I felt loved like I had never been before. And we both felt humbled by this, as I loved her back with the same intensity. We loved each other with all of our hearts and minds and bodies. And when we were in each other's company, which happened infrequently, all that we felt was total happiness and bliss, because everything we wanted, we had in that moment of being together, instead of apart like we had been most of the time. There was no huge explosion. There was peace, contentment, and total happiness. But when we were apart, it was ecstatic energy, Shakti, that pulled us together like ultra strong magnets. We became, what would you call it? We could feel each other's thoughts, see each other's mind states. She could tell when I get up in the morning, and she would call me 2 minutes after I got up. And we exchange things like this, like telepathy. It's a magical experience. It took me totally out of the world of the mundane. It took me totally out of Robert's world of nothingness and emptiness into a world of bliss, a world of Ed and God in one body, and Jay and God in her body. And we worshiped each other. We worshiped God. And there was changes in us, energies grew, expanded. And then I realized God one day in that experience I just explained. He was pleased with my love, the degree of it, my surrender. And he showed himself to me as an explosive experience which has never left me and left me constantly in communion with God. This is what I'm trying to give all of you in the same way, by directly energizing each of you, sending the Shakti in your room, around you, loving you, penetrating you, eroticizing you, awakening the sexual energy, awakening the heart energy, awakening the brain and the third eye. And then also through words and the stories I tell about my own experiences, the experiences that my students are having. I post them all the time on Facebook and on the blog, how they feel love, how they feel this, how they feel that, the energies, bliss, whatever it is, to let everybody know that this is available to everybody if only they persist. And if they persist not in thinking, what does this mean? What does this mean? How do I get it? How do I get it? But in terms of feeling, you become a feeler and not a thinker or a looker. The energy has to go out of your head into your body, into your heart, into your gut. You move to your heart and you become a heartfelt person, feeling your way through life instead of thinking your way through life. When you're a thinker, you're not a feeler. When you're thinking, you can't really feel. Yeah, you can talk about integrating these two things. It's not so easy because most people are thought dominated. And when they try to leave into the feeling, they're usually snatched back by the thinking, which destroys whatever feeling state they've gotten into. It takes a long time, or God realization, before you can stay in your body instead of into your mind. But by staying in the body, I don't mean that you become the body, but you become more fully that which feels the body, the spirit inside, whatever the life force creates, however it's creating it, consciousness, along with will, along with love, along with the energies that move through us that keep the body going, the will going, the power that knows the way that Robert talked about. All about surrender. Surrender to the feelings. Surrender to your own body feelings. It's not about being silent, getting your mind stopped. It's about getting into yourself, getting deeply into yourself and starting to feel love. You can learn to feel love. It's like a muscle. You can practice loving. You can direct that love at that felt sense of I-ness within you, which would speed your journey. Or hang around satsang and fall in love with somebody at satsang. Do it long distance. Because when you're close, it's an entirely different experience. It's just peace and rest when you're close. You have no real desire for sex, although that can happen. The desire that you had was just to be close to your beloved, to hold her, to touch her, to touch her belly with your fingertips, to smell her, wet kiss her, hold her close, or vice versa. And then you feel rested, because everything you always wanted, you now have the presence of that person who you love. So, this path I teach is one of love. The strange thing is, the more you go on this path, the more clear Advaita becomes to you. You begin to understand what real emptiness is, what real nothingness is, how everything is illusory, it's just passing images, passing concepts. You begin to see the difference between concepts and reality. And you're no longer a thinker. You don't think in terms of cause or effect, or of logical inconsistency, or relative proofs of different ideas. They're all just like dream-like objects. There's no real proof. There's no real truth. If there were, there wouldn't be a need for trials and convincing jurors of the truths by giving examples, by giving evidence which may convince a few but doesn't convince many, depending on their biases, and therefore how you select a jury. In the end, there is no truth. You have your point of view, others have their point of view, and we tend to hang around with others that have the same point of view we do. I love you all. I just want you to feel this too. To open yourself to love. 26 years ago, I ran into a woman, a ravishingly beautiful woman with a fantastic body who was very powerful, very wealthy, very politically connected. And I felt such love for her then. I felt that same surrender, that same awe, the same fear of her power and my own power within me. But at that time, it didn't work. I wasn't developed enough. I hadn't matured enough. She was too scary to me, the power that she had. It was like being in the presence of somebody working at 10,000 watts and I only could take 2,000. But now I can take 10,000, I can take 20,000, I can take 30,000. And she called me the other day after 26 years, and we had a great talk. I felt the same love for her that awakened me later on, years later, and that I had for her back then. And it was ecstatic to feel this. And then we separated. But I still felt ecstatic. My world was lit up again. And that's how it goes. I find my beloveds at Satsang, at other places, and I communicate with them. We have exchanges and we see how we feel. And you too can be doing this. Talk to other people in the Sangha. We're all one family. Love one another. Is there any questions? Are there any questions? Any comments?